Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Autistic in the Workplace. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We're going back to dealing with the issues in regards to the workplace with Autistic in the Workplace. But before we do, the usual disclaimers. And that is, folks, it's only one trigger warning for these videos. Okay? On this channel, we do curse on occasion. We tend to sometimes speak about dark subjects. And let's face it, you're dealing with someone whose stepdad helped primarily raise her, who's an army vet and a truck driver. I get most of my verbiage from him and my mom, some of it from dad. You can usually tell when I'm switching between the two. So, parental supervision, all right? Called Not for Kids for a reason. Should be self explanatory. All right, so now, like promised, we're going over the exact same information, but we are now going over it through the perspective of not the manager, but the autistic employee. And what is it that we can do as autistic employees? Ideally, I know the situation sucks. I know we're hated. I know how the workplace generally tends to treat us. That's never going to change until we start educating people and showing them what that looks like in the practical workplace. Okay? Education is the biggest tool in the toolbox to fight against ignorance, hatred, and stupidity. I say this as a full chested nihilist because I've seen it. But back to where we are. An autistic person may encounter various challenges in social communication, impacting their ability to interact effectively with others. Now, why do I want to go through this through the autistic perspective? Let me tell you why. The majority of us have been dealing with the issues that crop up due to misunderstandings because neurotypicals are not taught how autistics communicate, then I can go over in a single setting. It's innumerous times just for that of a single individual. In fact, if I were to go over all the misunderstandings and how horrific situations have managed to crop up for autistics because of it, this video would never end until the trumpet sounds and it's judgment day. Okay? It's not just that, but for a lot of us autistics, especially when we're young adults, talking 20s, right? And we already have a chip on our shoulder because of all the miscommunication and all the stupidity that it's led to. We can't, by the time we enter into the workplace for the first time, folks, we're already jaded. Let me say that again. When adult autistics are entering into the workplace for the first time, in spite of the fact of never doing anything like it before, we're already jaded. Okay? So when we're coming into that new job, we're coming in conscious or unconscious with a chip already on our shoulder. Our side as autistics, we gotta realize this. I'm not saying you need to hammer down on yourselves over things that you cannot control, but you need to keep this as head knowledge because your new manager hasn't been with you your whole life. They haven't seen all of this. They are encountering you for the first time. So, as autistics, we got to keep this in the back of our heads and not approach doing full disclosure as though we are a drill sergeant addressing their boot camp attendees. The urge is there. The urge is remarkably strong. But you want to talk about a good way from get-go to not have the greatest relationship with your boss? It's coming in with that chip on your shoulder without realizing or acknowledging. Not only does your manager not know about any of that, but the fact that your manager is coming to this with clip notes knowledge. And as annoying as it is, we do have to teach because nobody else has. And we can't assume that they automatically know. They're neurotypicals. Of course they don't. All right? Keep this in the back of your head when you're going into full disclosure. Do not go in there with guns blazing and wrath in your eyes. It's not going to end well. Nor do you go in there and start dictating to your manager. You want to find a way to get a manager to look for ways to fire you? Pull that. Okay? You have to approach it as encountering a new person you've never spoke to before. You have to separate them from all the hatred and the vitriol that's been thrown at you. And I know that's easier said than done. I have lived it on multiple occasions, and I'm going through it again now. But if you come off full disclosure demanding and angry, and then get mad when they don't understand you, well, what did you do? You told them you were autistic and gave them nothing else. All they have experience with is how to manage neurotypicals. Do you understand? It's not fair. It's not right. But sometimes you gotta adapt to the world that you live in order to make things better for yourself. You can't wait along for somebody else to do it. All right? Or you are going to find yourself hopping from job to job to job to job. So, autistics, keep in the back of your head your boss's challenges. Keep in the back of your head that you may be their first autistic employee they've ever dealt with. They may have a cousin, a sister, a son that might have it, but they've never dealt with it in the practical workplace. And give them a little room to fill it out. Because then that's when you can collaborate instead of talking at each other. Okay? Let's move on, shall we? Nonverbal cues. Individuals with autism spectrum disorder may face challenges interpreting nonverbal cues like facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, and eye contact. Now, autistics, if you watched the last video, you remember when I spoke about my chronic RBF. It's not an official diagnosis, folks. It's one I pulled out of thin air, but boy, I like it, and I'm going to keep using it. It's an acronym from chronic resting bitch face. Okay? Some of us have it. Those of us who have it know that we do, and we've known from relatively early ages, right? Unless you're me, in which I was utterly clueless until I hit 18. But hey, not everybody's perfect, right? Okay. Sometimes as autistics, we don't always realize all our little quirks and how they come off to other people because we don't think about them, right? We don't think so much about staring someone in the eyes unless they stomp their feet and make it a point. I dance in my chair a lot. It's actually a form of stimming where I just kind of rock my hips like this in the chair. a good quarter of the day whenever I'm on the phones. Right? Do you think somebody coming in from the outside would even know how to handle that? Because it looks weird. You are rocking back and forth, shaking your hips like there's music on, and what's happening behind you is a documentary about World War I. All right? So, what do we do about this? What do we do about chronic RBF and the fact that our managers have probably never had to deal with that in a work setting before? Warn a bruh, okay? And a bruh can be male or female in this case, non binary, trans, what have you. I just like the word bruh. Say it again, bruh. Yeah, I'm weird. Anyways, you got to realize that that resting bitch face doesn't look so great to the rest of the world, especially when your face tends to not emote unless you actively, by thinking about it, force it to emote. Okay? So, in situations where you have chronic RBF and you are too exhausted to try even to attempt to mask it, instead of trying to make your boss magically somehow know what's going on there, remember the fact that they're neurotypical. They know about resting bitch face, yes, but their version tends to last maybe minutes at most. Ours lasts 8 hours a day, every day. They don't know how to handle it. It scares the shit out of them. If it doesn't piss them off, all right? I'm not telling you to force yourself to act. I'm saying communicate with your manager. Don't just give them the cliff notes of autism through the full disclosure and think, well, that's handled. It's not handled. It's not even close to being handled. Okay? Communicate. Tell your boss if you too, like me, have chronic RBF. All right? Say, hey, there's going to be some times when you and me are talking, and I'm just going to be so exhausted and so overwhelmed that I will lose my ability to focus and be able to emote. This does not mean that what you say is not very important to me. It does not mean that I'm not listening. It doesn't mean that I don't care. It means this is natural to me. Emoting is something I actually have to put thought into. Unless it's a subject like this in which the passion just pours out of my body. But most of us, unlucky folks, do not get to live out our passions through our jobs. So, for those of us who are collecting a paycheck, communicating with your boss when you have issues with chronic RBF face is a little bit crucial. You got to let them know so that when they encounter it in the workplace, it doesn't cause issues to crop up. They understand now that you're still listening, you still care. It's just at that point, you are too tired to keep up the mask. Let's continue, shall we? This difficulty can lead to misunderstandings in social interactions, as subtle emotional signals might be missed or intentions misinterpreted. I am going to curse. Fucking suck at determining what people mean by body language. Utterly fucking suck. You have no idea. This is why a lot of people who flirted with me when I was a kid went completely over my head. I thought for sure that I was ugly as sin and no guy would ever want to date me. And literally, my mom had to sit my ass down and explain it to me like I was two. All right? Just saying. Those emotional signals, if you're an autistic, if you see it coming off your boss, for example, and you notice them getting agitated, you might want to ask them if there's something they're trying to communicate that you're missing. Because we're not brilliant at nonverbal cues. Some of us better than others. But to be brutally honest, unless your body language is so blunt that it is essentially a brick through the window, we're not going to catch it. We won't. It's part of our diagnosis. What I can tell you is when I'm not being forced to directly stare at a person and can thereby better be able to put my full focus on paying attention to what it is that they're telling me, it always ends up better, doesn't it? Let's be bare bones here, okay? You may need to have more meetings with your boss than your neurotypical peers. Do not make that feel like you are anything less than any of the other employees or like you contribute less. Because you don't. You may need more meetings to keep a constant line of open communication between you and your boss. So when things crop up like this, you can kind of teach. Okay? Let's continue to read, shall we? Similarly, for someone with ASD, utilizing nonverbal cues can be challenging. Fucking tell me about it. Do you know how exaggerated my acting has to be to get a nonverbal point across? I feel like an idiot every time I have to do it. I feel like it's that ridiculous overacting. Like William Shatner level overreacting. God. Sorry. Right? It's ridiculous. Takes a lot of energy, a lot of mental focus, right? We all know this. Emoting is not our strong suit, right? So our nonverbal cues are usually polar opposite, if not absolutely bizarre, from the mind of a neurotypical. They don't understand our nonverbal cues because, let's face it might be alien to them, right? There was one time I was actually in a really good mood. My numbers were up. I was getting praised. I had just survived Black Friday and I was feeling pretty damn good, right? But during my coaching while getting praised, I had a combo of monotone voice and resting bitch face. Because Black Friday went on way longer than it needed to. And by the time the last 15-hour shift had been done, 4 consecutive days in a row, back to back, on maybe a collective of 10 hours of sleep, I went nonverbal during that very last hour. Almost nonverbal. I had to re-say things a lot. Let's just put it that way, right? Yeah, difficulties. Now, if you are a neurotypical boss who has never had any practical application teaching when it comes to having autistic employees, aren't you going to wonder what is wrong? Aren't you, having dealt with neurotypicals when they tend to look that way, or when they just look exhausted and all of that? It's because something's wrong. For an autistic, the very same reaction can simply be a reaction of pure unadulterated exhaustion, right? So, what do we do, kids? Communicate, 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 communicate. Keep that open conversation with your boss at all times. All times. It's one of the best things about my job. I have an open chat where I can go and directly DM my boss right now while I am off the clock if something strikes my mind that I think she needs to know. Yes, I got a new boss. Thank fuck. We'll get in that another day. But you see where I'm going, right? How are they supposed to interpret that? Communication, right? That's coming from, we cannot assume that our very neurotypical employers have any practical knowledge when it comes about autism. Because 9 times out of 10, they don't. When you find one, it's a unicorn. Just saying, right? As long as we can come in with the head knowledge that these folks have not had practical experience in dealing with autistic underlings before, and you keep that head knowledge and you keep that line of open communication, that's gonna make everything 1,000 times better. A lot of very stressful situations can be avoided just by communication. Now, coming from an autistic perspective, meeting it one on one with your boss is one of the most paranoia inducing, anxiety ridden, nervous situations to us on planet Earth. We generally assume if the manager wants to see us, we did something wrong, we're going to be fired. Doesn't matter if it's true or not, our mindset is in paranoia mode because of how we've been treated our whole lives, right? So, bosses, we'll mention this. I know this is on the autistic side. I'm going to make this suggestion, and I'm going to ask other autistics to make the same type of suggestion to their boss. What has made everything infinitely better for me is that I no longer have to rely on just face to face communication. Like I said, I could go DM my boss right now. I could pick up my phone, pull up my Slack, DM her right now. It is open communication that is open for me all day, every day. Anything I need to tell her. What I feel like as autistic employees, because not every job situation is going to give you that opportunity. I know it's going to sound dumb, but For the love of God, Autistics, my fellows, hear me out here. In fact, I recommend the same thing for ADHD employees. Because whereas there's no practical information on autism in the workplace, there is fucking nothing for ADHD. Nothing, nada, zip, zilch. When I ask them how much they have fun trying to get reasonable accommodations, yeah. A lot of people think they know what ADHD is and what the difficulties are and have convinced themselves it's not a disability. That's what we're dealing with here. So I would suggest, if I were you, to your manager. In fact, one of the easiest ways to do it, that way it is already out there from get-go before you start your first day, tell them you would like to keep open a line of communication with them. That is something that is separate from your face-to-face interactions. Whether it's through email, or if you want to open up a Slack for just you two. You don't have to be in the call center in order to utilize something like Slack. You could have an employee who's autistic who's working with you at McDonald's. Having that Slack chain open where you can reach out to them at any time, and it doesn't come with that high anticipation and dread of the face-to-face interaction, could really save you on some sticky situations with your boss. So just a suggestion there, something practical that we can offer. We can't just go in there with full disclosure and list all our problems like we're a person reciting our diagnosis paperwork. What are they supposed to do with that? Give them something practical. Give them something that they could do immediately. It leads to better communication, and it gives your manager the feeling that you do care about this job. You do want to be here, and you want that open communication so that you two can best work together. All right? We're going to close out with that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. If you could, folks, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and please don't forget to utilize those comments. I appreciate your time this afternoon. As always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea do hope you have a good one. I'll see you again in a few minutes. Bye-bye, everyone.